Hi everyone, welcome back to another video of Mike's Geek Corner with your host, Mike Quevedo. And since this being Halloween season, I thought I'd review for you all a heroic fantasy horror movie, which is the very underrated Solomon Kane. It premiered in 2009 on the Toronto Film Festival and in France that same year, and in 2010 in Spain, where it rivaled Avatar at the box office, in the UK also in 2010, and in 2012 on limited release in the US. The $40 million budgeted R-rated film is based on a literary pulp character of the same name created by Robert E. Howard in 1928. It's written and directed by M.J. Bassett and stars James Purefoy in the title role and features such supporting roles by praised talent such as the two lead actors Pete Postlethwaite and Max von Sydow, as well as Rachel Hurd-Wood, Alice Creech, Jason Fleming, and Game of Thrones' Rory McCann. It is produced by Samuel Harira, the man behind the Resident Evil films, as well as the 2001 cult classic Brotherhood of the Wolf. This movie is basically what 2004's Van Helsing should have been had it been done more seriously. Or imagine Batman and Conan merged in one, and you basically get Solomon Kane. Speaking of Conan, like 1982's Conan the Barbarian, 2009 Solomon Kane also takes certain liberties with the character as far as giving him an origin, which Robert Howard never did in the books. However, unlike John Milius' Conan film, Bassett's Solomon Kane is comparatively more in line with the source material, as I'll explain in more detail later on. For now, let me say this movie is gothic, pulp fantasy, swashbuckling, high adventure at its finest. If you like Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy films, the Lord of the Rings films, Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow, and early 80s sword and sorcery films like Excalibur, Dragon Slayer, and the two aforementioned films Conan the Barbarian and Brotherhood of the Wolf, you must give Solomon Kane a try. But before I get into the details that hopefully will persuade you to do so, let me delve for you a little bit into the history of the character of Solomon Kane. And what better way to start an intro for the character of Solomon Kane than with a quote of Robert E. Howard himself describing the Puritan. Quote, "He was a man born out of his time, a strange blending of Puritan and Cavalier with a touch of the ancient philosopher, and more than a touch of the pagan, though the last assertion would have shocked him unspeakably. A nativist of the days of blind chivalry he was, a knight-errant in the somber choices of a fanatic. A hunger in his soul drove him on, unurged to right all wrongs, protect all weaker things, avenge all crimes against right and justice. Wayward and restless as the wind, he was consistent in only one respect. He was true to his ideals of justice and right. Such was Solomon Kane." End quote. So yeah, before Batman, the Phantom, and the Shadow, there was Solomon Kane. Kane was introduced in the pulp magazine Weird Tales on August of 1928 in the story Red Shadows. He was established as a tall, gaunt-faced, somber-looking, and deeply devoted English Puritan in the late 16th century, early 17th century, who, partly as soldier for hire, wanders the world to eradicate all forms of evil, becoming known as God's angry man. He has a black and white view of good and evil. His main weapons are his Spanish rapier and flintlock pistols. The most recognizable elements in his attire are a slouch hat and cloak. Such classic stories of Solomon Kane include the aforementioned Red Shadows, in which Kane, driven by a determination to avenge the death of a woman by trailing the band of cutthroats who killed her all the way to Africa, where he also encounters his nemesis Le Loup influencing the tribal worshippers of a gorilla god. Then there's the Jarn Skulls in the Stars, where the wandering Puritan comes across a murdering swamp-dwelling demon with a haunting secret. In another travel to the Dark Continent within the story Moon of Skulls, Kane sets off to rescue a kidnapped English girl who is being kept within a hidden city ruled by a cruel vampire queen. In Blades of the Brotherhood, the puritanical swashbuckler trails the vicious pirate and his brotherhood to the coastline of England, where a young nobleman and the girl he loves become a pawn of the ungodly pirates. And in the poem The Return of Sir Richard Grenville, Kane is visited by the ghost of his longtime friend, the historical privateer Sir Richard Grenville, as they fight a horde of savage tribesmen. While not as popular as Howard's Cimmerian Adventurer, the Solomon Kane IP still achieved its following, which led to reprinting the original stories and comic book adaptations from Marvel and Dark Horse. Around the early to mid-90s, producers Paul and Michael Barrow and Marcelo Anciano had come up with the idea of buying the film's rights to Solomon Kane after Paul Barrow had mentioned to Anciano how he wanted to do a project that combined the puritanical horror vibe of 1968's Witchfinder General with something fantastical. And so Anciano showed him some Marvel comics of Solomon Kane and suggested to Barrow to pursue the rights to the property, which he acquired shortly after during the 1994 Cannes Film Festival. After the first installment of Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy arrived in theaters in late 2001 and did phenomenal at the box office, Paul and Michael Barrow felt the time was right to launch Solomon Kane into production. However, doing that ended up taking longer due to the character of Kane not having an origin story provided by Robert Howard in the original books, and they felt it was important to ground the character before becoming the fully formed Puritan. M.J. Bassett, who had previously helmed the 2002 horror war film Death Watch and had read Howard's Kane stories as a teenager, came along and, guided by Howard's hints of Kane's possible background in the poems Solomon Kane's Homecoming and the aforementioned return of Sir Richard Grenville, developed a script that showcased Solomon Kane at one point being a ruthless privateer who turns around and searches for redemption, as he uses his lethal skills to fight evil in all its forms. Producer Samuel Hadida was very pleased with Bassett's script that he granted her request to direct the movie, after Bassett turning in her storyboards and her vision for the film on paper, which got visualized by Judge Dredd comic artist Greg Staples. Though set in England, the film was mainly shot in Prague, so to take advantage of Virgin lands that had no advertising boards for meters. For the title role, English actor James Purefoy, who had already worked with Hadida on Resident Evil, and had recently made a bit of an impact on the 2005-2007 series Rome as Mark Anthony, was cast as Solomon Kane. And while originally Bassett had reservations, as she first saw Purefoy as too contemporary looking for the character, she became totally sold on Purefoy after they discussed the way he was going to approach the character, which was an approach not only informed by Howard's books, but also by Clint Eastwood's portrayal of the man with no name from Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy. The result is indeed a thrilling performance, as Purefoy exudes the same level of dedication that Hugh Jackman had for Wolverine and Christian Bale for Batman. Purefoy also worked out to achieve Solomon Kane's thin, wiry, muscular look, as well as training extensively in sword fighting and horseback riding. The other cast members consist of Max von Sydow, again in a film adaptation of a Robert E. Howard creation after 1982's Conan the Barbarian, portraying Solomon Kane's strict father, Josiah Kane. Rachel Hurd Wood, who played Wendy Darling in 2003's Peter Pan, again steps into the role of damsel, this time as Meredith Crowthorne, the daughter of Puritan travelers William and Catherine Crowthorne, played by the usual suspects Pete Postlethwaite and Star Trek's Alice Creech, respectively, who is captured by the followers of the sorcerer Malachi to be a slave. And for Malachi himself, we have Guy Ritchie regular Jason Fleming, who displays a most effective devilish flair. In charge of developing the CGI creatures was Patrick Tatopoulos, who had previously created the title creature in 1988's Godzilla, as well as worked on other films like 300, Van Helsing, and Underworld. Considering the tight budget of the film, most of the CGI effects look quite nifty, and the stuff that looks more crude is not too bad as to take you out of the film. It is the practical makeup and effects, though, that are the true glorious sight to behold, such as the Devil's Reaper, flesh-eating ghouls beneath a church, a witch, and Malachi's lieutenant, Masked Rider, who resembles a medieval Leatherface. After having scored the supernatural swashbuckling adventure film Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, composer Klaus Badel proves a solid pick for Solomon Kane, as he delivers an exuberant musical score that is layered with suspense, terror, creeping action, and mystery. At times it may give vibes of Hans Zimmer's theme for Batman Begins. The film starts off in North Africa during the year 1600, where English privateer Solomon Kane led his ship's men against Ottoman forces defending a fortress. Once Kane and his crew defeat the fortress's defenders and raid the fortress, demons popping from mirrors kill most of Kane's men, before the latter makes his way into the throne room. Inside the throne room, as Kane is attempting to loot the riches, the privateer is suddenly confronted by a demon called the Devil's Reaper, who tells him that his soul is to be delivered to Satan due to his sinful life. But before the Reaper can spirit Solomon's life away, the swordsman rejects his fate and escapes the Reaper as he launches himself out of a window and into the waters. A year later, we find Solomon back in England receiving sanctuary in a monastery, as he has put away his life of violence and has donated his wealth to the church with the intent to find redemption. However, Kane is banished from the monastery after one of the monks tell him his destiny doesn't lie with them. And so Kane sets forth to wander the countryside before he is attacked by a group of robbers, and after Kane rejects the choice to fight them due to his turn to pacifism, knock him unconscious. He is shortly after found and nursed back to health by a Puritan family called the Crowthorns, who are traveling towards a new world. As Solomon travels with the Crowthorns, they come across a sinister witch who marks the Crowthorns' daughter, Meredith. This action leads to the Puritan family later being ambushed by the followers of the sorcerer Malachi, under the command of a terrifying Masked Rider. After Meredith is kidnapped and her father and brothers are killed, Solomon renounces his vows to pacifism and puts his skills as a gifted killer to fight off Malachi's forces across the land, as he attempts to fulfill his oath to rescue Meredith, in a journey not only filled with the most horrific spawns of evil, but one that will also lead him back to confront his past. The first time I heard about the Solomon Kane character might have been around the early 2000s, as I was finding out more about the work of Robert E. Howard through the Conan back issues I'd buy. But it wasn't until 2004 that I began reading Howard's Kane stories after reading on online message boards that Hugh Jackman's Van Helsing seemed to resemble Kane quite a bit, and that got me intrigued to dig into the character more. And what can I say? Coming from the author of Conan, it was next to impossible to expect anything short of edge-of-your seat, page-turning excitement. So fast forward a little bit to 2007, as I get stoked when I read that James Purefoy is going to play Solomon Kane in an upcoming film, and even more so when a teaser poster is released not long after. And to complete my hype for the film was a trailer released in 2009, which had a very 300-like frenetic energy to it. As mentioned earlier, the film was first released in Europe, partly in 2009 and partly in 2010, But, supposedly due to legal reasons, it wasn't released in North America theatrically until 2012 in limited release. Still, the film mainly got positive reviews. When I finally saw the film on DVD, it was everything I expected it to be. A straightforward sword and sorcery action film with the pulpiness that I appreciate in films like The Witchfinder General, Captain Kronos, Sleepy Hollow, and Brotherhood of the Wolf. It's a package of heroic adventure with a sense of gothic and the macabre. At $40 million, the film looks like it cost more. The cinematography by Brotherhood of the Wolf's Dan Laustsen is quite lavish. MJ Bassett does an excellent job in capturing the essence of a Solomon Kane, Robert Howard story by carefully playing by the rules and doing it considerably better than John Milius did with Conan the Barbarian. As the origin provided for Kane in the film, unlike the origin that was done for Conan in the '82 movie, does not stray too far from the character's ideology. Solomon Kane's motivation for redeeming his soul can be seen relatively more in line with the hints Howard gives in his writings than Conan seeking revenge or being raised as a slave. So if you're looking for a gritty, dark adventure fantasy film that pulls no punches, has a compelling hero, twisted, scary villains and monsters, and some excellent choreographed sword action, check out Solomon Kane. This, like 2012's Dredd, is a solid example of how an independent genre film, when not in the stranglehold of studio meddling, can be grand. It is available on Roku and Vudu. You can also look for the physical media online or on brick and mortar stores. So that's a review. Hope you enjoyed it. If so, please give it a like. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell. And feel free to leave your comments below. Happy Halloween, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.